Hey everyone, this video is going to be how to rig an odometer in Modo. Ryan Johnson posted the scene on the Modo forums with a question about how to go about rigging it and animating it. I have the finished scene here, and I will go ahead and scrub the timeline and kind of explain how it works. So, as you can see, the first digit spins up in value, and as it completes one full rotation, it increments the next dial in line, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and delete the setup that I have here and then repeat the process. So down here in the rigging panel, I have all of the dials already pulled in. So this first dial pertains to this box right here, the next dial, so on and so forth. So this is kind of how I'm going to click on the items for the rigging. So how the scene is set up: there is an odometer driver, which is a locator, and its rotation X channel is animated over time. This is going to be piped into the rest of the rig. And disconnect that. It's going to be piped into the rest of the rig, and it's going to drive the whole thing. So right now, I have two keyframes, and you can see its value changes over time, and that's going to drive the whole thing. So with the odometer driver in the rigging panel down here, I'm going to go ahead and connect its rotation X channel to the rotation X channel of the first digit. Now, if I scrub the timeline, you can see the first digit is animated properly. And that's about it for the first digit. The rest of these guys are going to require something Modo calls channel links, or as some of you may be familiar with, set-driven keys. So I'm going to go ahead and explain that process, or I'm going to go ahead and go through that and explain it as I go. So what you do is something very similar to this, where you say this item is going to drive this item. I'm going to go ahead and click on the first dial, load that as the driver, click on the second dial, load that as the driven, and then down here under direct link, that's what we've done here, where we've piped the rotation X of this item directly into the rotation X of this item. However, we don't want to do that with this. We want to create a relationship. So I'm going to click rotation X and rotation X, switch to relationship, and then add a link. And that's when this panel pops up. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the animated driver for now, just so it's not animated while we're rigging, and I'll explain that in a second. What this panel does is it allows us to create a relationship where we can say when the driver is at 0 degrees rotation, the driven item is also at 0 degrees rotation. Go ahead and set that as a key, and I can rotate this to change the driver, or the first dial in this case. And what we want it to do is when this dial completes a full 360 degree rotation, we are going to increment this next dial by one number, which is negative 36 degrees. So we are going to go ahead and create that mapping where negative 360 equals 36 degrees, and create. So now, as you can see, as we change the value of the first one, the second dial is going to spin up, with the addendum that it's moving the entire time. We don't want that second digit to start moving until it's time. So only once the first digit hits 9 do we want the second digit to start moving. So we have to create a third section for the mapping, where we say when this dial equals negative 325 degrees, do not move that first dial yet. 0. So negative 325 and 0, set a key. Now, as we animate that first dial, it's only going to move the second dial once it hits 9, and then it's going to complete negative 36 degrees of rotation. The second addendum is, as this first dial drills up and completes another revolution, it doesn't do anything to the second dial. This is because we've only created 3 mappings: 0 equals 0, negative 325 equals 0, and negative 360 equals negative 36. So Modo only knows about what to do when those values are hit. This is where we can go into the graph editor and see what this tool was doing. So in this tool, it says that we have 3 keys, and here they are. If I select one of the keys, you can see up here the values that we punched in, 0 and 0, negative 325 and 0, and negative 360, negative 36. So all this is doing is giving us a visual representation of what we're seeing in the scene. I'm going to go ahead and do two things. I'm going to change these curves so that they're completely linear. And so that takes care of one of the problems where, if you noticed before, as I was moving this dial was slightly nudging as I was moving it. That was because this curve was kind of smooth. So as I was moving this, you can see the first dial kind of moving. That's because those curves are pulled up a little bit. So what this is doing, and you can see along the bottom and along the left here, is when the driver object is at 0 degrees rotation, stay at 0 degrees. When it gets to negative 325 degrees, continue staying at 0 degrees. Only once it hits negative 325, increment to negative 36 degrees at 360 degrees. Next thing we have to do is take care of when the first dial completes the second revolution. This is where we only had created 3 keyframes, and Modo only knows what to do at those specific values. What we can do up here is use the pre and post behavior, where we can tell Modo offset repeat. So what that's going to do is it's going to continue those relationships into infinity. So we can drill up the first dial, and as we do that, it's going to increment the second dial, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and switch that back to 0. Now the cool thing is, for the rest of these, the process is completely identical and the numbers stay the same. So I'm going to go ahead and click the next dial in line, open up the channel links, load driver, load driven, create a relationship to rotation X to rotation X, and this is where we bump into another addendum. What this tool allows us to do is to interactively change the value of the driver, which in this case is this guy right here. The problem is this driver is already being driven by the dial before it. So what this tool is going to do when we change it is it's going to say this channel is being modified and it can't edit it, which means that it can't access that channel. So what we need to do is go straight into the graph editor. So when I created that link, it created a keyframe of 0 and 0. So there's our first keyframe. We can add more keyframes by middle clicking. So I'm going to go ahead and middle click and create 2 more keyframes. And now I can actually type in their values up here manually. So negative 325, negative 36. Oops. Negative 325, 0. Negative 360, negative 36. I'm going to go ahead and clamp the handles. And then set the behavior. And I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of them. Oops. There we go. All right. Now that I have all of that done, I'm going to go ahead and reconnect that driver, and the whole scene is done again. There we go. I hope that helped. Thanks, guys.